Coming up on Network Africa. Clashes erupt outside Tunisian parliament after Prime Minister sacked. Man accused of trying to kill Mali president dies in custody. Plus, South Africa eases COVID restrictions, passes peak of third wave. Hello and a warm welcome to the program. I'm Teniola Shobowale. It was an eventful weekend across Africa, from reactions to Sierra Leone's parliament voting to abolish the death penalty to nationwide demonstrations over the Tunisian government's handling of the pandemic. Well, let's begin the program by taking a look at the news and stories that made headlines over the weekend. On Saturday, human rights campaigners held as historic a decision by Sierra Leone's parliament to unanimously vote to abolish the death penalty, more than 20 years after the West African country carried out its last execution. Following the vote, President Julius Maada Bio is expected to soon sign the bill into law, which will make Sierra Leone the 23rd African country to abolish capital punishment. The death penalty will be replaced with life imprisonment or a minimum 30-year jail term. Over in Ethiopia, the president of Amara region called on all residents holding arms to mobilize against rebels from neighboring Tigray. The call to arms on Sunday follows a similar statement on Friday by the leader of Ethiopia's Afar region, leading to fears that the 8-month-long conflict in Tigray could spread.
Excellencies.
Somalia postponed elections that were due to start on Sunday after months of delays. Indirect parliamentary and presidential polls were due to open on July the 25th, with 4 days of voting for the upper house by state delegates. The election cycle was due to end with a presidential poll on October the 10th. Also on Sunday, hundreds of Tunisians took to the streets of the capital, Tunis, and several other cities to demand the resignation of the government over its handling of the coronavirus pandemic. Cases have been rising sharply in recent weeks, putting further pressure on the faltering economy. And the latest on the situation in Tunisia, street clashes have erupted outside Parliament a day after President Kais Saied removed the Prime Minister and suspended Parliament. Troops also blocked the parliamentary speaker and another leader, a party leader, from entering the building. The latest political crisis follows nationwide protests over economic troubles and the government's mishandling of the coronavirus crisis.
In the early hours of Monday, following the sacking of the country's prime minister and suspension of parliament, Tunisians backing rival sides threw stones at each other outside the parliament building. Opposing sides engaged in scuffles around the parliament, with police forces attempting to separate them.
The decisions by President Kais Saied are not correct, against the constitution and the reality. They bring us back again to 1954. The scene of the parliament closed by tanks is very disgraceful.
Military also barred parliament speaker from entering the building. Opposing the president's decision, the speaker described it a coup against the revolution and constitution. He rallied his supporters to take to the streets. The president, Saied, warned against any violent response. On Sunday, President Kais Saied had joined tens of thousands of his supporters that thronged the streets of the capital, Tunis, protesting the government's handling of the pandemic. Fireworks were set off while the crowds cheered, in scenes recalling the Arab Spring protests a decade ago, which introduced a democratic system to the country. Earlier, the president laid out a number of other decisions in addition to dismissing the government.
After consultations took place with the Prime Minister and the Speaker of the Parliament, Article 80 of the Constitution was implemented and a number of decisions taken. The first decision is to freeze all the powers of Parliament. The second decision is to lift the immunity of all members of the Parliament. The third decision is that the President assumes the executive authority with the help of a Prime Minister appointed by the President of the Republic.
Mr. Said, an independent, has had a long-standing feud with the Prime Minister. Mr. Mechichi has the backing of the largest party in Parliament, Ennahda. Protests that erupted along with Sunday celebrations were directed at the moderate Islamic Ennahda party. Once banned before the 2011 revolution, that party had been the most consistently successful since then and a member of successive coalition governments. But anger against the government has been simmering in Tunisia for years, brought on by corruption, declining state services, and growing unemployment.
In West Africa, Mali's government says a man accused of trying to stab interim President Assimi Goïta last week has died in hospital while on the guard. The assailant, who has not been identified, was arrested after the failed stabbing, which took place while Mr. Goïta was attending Eid prayers in a mosque last Tuesday. A government statement says the man's health had worsened in custody and he was taken to hospital where he died. There are no particular details about his health prior to the incident. The cause of death is said to be under investigation. Mr. Goïta, a Special Forces colonel in his late 30s, headed a push last August that overthrew elected President Ibrahim Boubacar Keïta after weeks of protests over corruption and a bloody rebellion. The VOA's Annie Rissenberg is in Bamako, from where she joins us for more on this. Annie, the suspect, whose identity has still not been revealed, was taken into custody following the assassination attempt on Tuesday, and now authorities say he has died. Tell us a bit more about this. Was this man at any point presented to judicial authorities?
So we're in the dark here in Bamako really about this case. There's not been really a ton of information. I do not believe that the man who attempted to assassinate Goïta, who is now supposedly dead, I do not believe that he was presented before judicial authorities. I suppose it could be possible, but normally, in that case, there would be some kind of information released by the government that, oh, you know, he was seen in court today, and there was no communication from their end that would imply or confirm that this man was presented before judicial authorities.
You know, like you mentioned, a lot still remains in the dark. Almost a week after, there's still a lot unclear. Who this man is, motives, or even if he acted alone. What other details have you heard in the past days?
Like I said, we have barely any information on this man. As of right now, we do not know his name, where he's from, his age, or what his motivations for this might have been. In the letter that the government did release stating that he had died, they said that they do not believe this to be an isolated incident. So they are implying that they do not believe that he was working alone. For right now, the public hasn't been presented with any information or evidence that confirms this. So I think that as time goes on, maybe in the next few days or the next few weeks, we will have more information.
Annie, how has Mr. Goïta responded to the latest developments?
So far, President Assimi Goïta has not addressed the current situation. I think this has obviously garnered a lot of international attention, so I think that it's very possible that he will address this probably with ORTM, which is the state television station, at some point, maybe today or in the next few days.
VOA's Annie Rissenberg in Bamako there speaking to us on the latest development from Mali. Some updates from the COVID-19 pandemic now. South Africa has eased some COVID-19 restrictions after President Cyril Ramaphosa said the country had largely passed the peak of its third wave of the pandemic. Speaking to the nation on Sunday night, President Ramaphosa cautioned the people to continue to be safety conscious as the virus remains very present. With more than 6.3 million people vaccinated, South Africa has inoculated over 10% of its population so far, and 18 to 34-year-olds have been added to the age range for vaccination.
Latest figures suggest that we have largely passed the peak of the third wave of infections, although there are areas in the country where we still need to be concerned because the rates of infections have not yet shown signs of decline. The measures we put in place for the past 28 days, alongside the continued adherence of South Africans to basic health precautions, have been effective in reducing the rate of infection. However, as we have observed before, there are significant differences between provinces. As infections in Gauteng fall, daily new infections in the Western Cape, in the Eastern Cape and KwaZulu-Natal continue to be on the rise. There has also been a concerning rise of infections in the Northern Cape after a period of relative stability. In all these cases, infections are being driven by the Delta variant, which, as we said before, is far more transmissible than previous variants. Now, more than ever, we need to adhere to the basic precautions so that we can limit the spread of the virus from one person to another. The overall decline in new infections means that it is possible to gradually ease some of the restrictions on gatherings, movement, and the sale of alcohol.
Our South Africa Bureau Chief Betty Dibia joins us now for more. Betty, while a nighttime curfew and compulsory face mask wearing remains in force, the weekday ban on alcohol sales has been lifted and people can now move between provinces. This must be a welcome development for South Africans, right?
Under the adjusted level 3 lockdown, nighttime curfew remains in place. The mandatory face mask wearing also remains in place. But for the curfew, it's been shifted from 9 p.m. to 4 a.m. It now stands at 10 p.m. to 4 a.m. Then the weekday ban on alcohol sales has been lifted somewhat. You can now buy alcohol off-site, that's from the supermarket or other stores, liquor stores, between Monday and Thursday from 10 a.m. to 6 p.m. But for on-site drinking, like in your restaurants and bars, you can have alcohol, but they have to stop the sale of alcohol by 8 p.m. and they have to shut down their businesses by 9. Of course, they're not taking that lightly. They're not happy about it. They want a complete lift of the ban, of the restrictions in their sector, because according to them, they've lost so much, not just in terms of not being able to pay salaries, but even keeping the businesses open. They claim that many of their businesses will not even be able to keep their doors open with what they have now. There are so many other areas. Schools have now reopened. That's mostly public schools. We have different calendars for different schools or school categories in South Africa. The public schools, or what they call Model C as well, opened today for the school children.
Betty, just a few weeks ago, South Africa was recording an average of about 20,000 cases a day. There were reports that the health system was overwhelmed. One would expect that with the mass unrest recently, those numbers would drive up, but, thankfully they haven't. How has South Africa managed to contain the virus now passing the peak of the third wave?
Indeed, we have come past the time when we had over 20,000 cases a day. At a point, we even recorded about 26,000, 24,000. And now, the last reporting cycle, we had about 9,000, just under 10,000 confirmed cases. The health sector was under pressure, the health system was under pressure, and the government continued its drive for people to stay safe. But as it's really not something one can say this is the reason why, because you had those who were saying, now that we're under lockdown, we're still getting high figures. So how do you explain that? Some political parties, opposition political parties, were even insisting that government should just remove all the restrictions and let life go on as normal, because the lockdown hasn't actually helped in keeping the figures down. But at least there was less pressure, especially with the ban on alcohol, there was less pressure on the health system. So they managed to cope up to this point. But thankfully, the numbers are going down. We've passed the peak of the third wave, numbers are going down. But the scientists have also warned that there could be a fourth and even a fifth. I was listening to one of the vaccinologists, Professor Shabir Mahdi, who was saying we have to up the effort to vaccinate, ensure that more people get vaccinated, and we have to learn to live with the virus because it's not going anytime soon. So vaccination ensures, according to him, that there is no extreme sickness and then the need for hospitalization. But as long as people are vaccinated, they are safer to protect them from serious illness.
Well, thanks a lot for bringing us up to speed, Betty. Still to come on the program, we'll have more on the COVID-19 pandemic. Thanks for staying with us. Well, taking a different approach from South Africa, Rwanda has extended a lockdown that prohibits unnecessary movements in the capital, Kigali, and 8 other districts as it analyzes the COVID-19 situation. People will still not be able to leave their houses for another 5 days. The current lockdown had seen businesses, schools, and transport operators close to reduce the spread of the coronavirus. Only 15 people are allowed to attend funerals as COVID-related fatalities increase. The extension has been announced for another 5 days, after which a review will be done to determine the gains. All the Algerian authorities have imposed partial lockdowns on 35 provinces amid a rapid surge in coronavirus infections in the country. People have been instructed to stay at home from 8 p.m. to 6 a.m. for 10 days in the provinces believed to have the most infection rates, including the capital Algiers. All gatherings, social and cultural, as well as sporting events, will be banned to curb the spread of the virus. A ministerial meeting also announced an overhaul of oxygen production capacity in hospitals to meet the increase in demand due to the coronavirus. The country has received 1,050 portable oxygen concentrators so far and will have acquired 9,000 units in a fortnight. Well, in West Africa, Ghana's President Nana Akufo-Addo has announced that funerals will last not more than 2 hours and attendance will be restricted to family members only. All funerals and weddings shall be held in open spaces. Ghanaians have elaborate and expensive funerals that involve days, weeks, or even months of mourning. The president expressed concern that the country was approaching the third COVID wave after recently surpassing 100,000 coronavirus infections. Well, Joy News correspondent Raymond Akwa is in Accra. He joins us now for more on the situation in the country. Raymond, it seems the government is tightening up again in preparation for a potential third wave. Apart from issuing restrictions on funerals, what else has been put in place to contain the spread of the virus?
I mean, first and foremost, there's a huge debate in the country as to whether or not there is indeed anything like tightening up currently happening. The understanding we have is that, first, funerals were banned in the last update. That's the major executive instrument that was issued. But now funerals can happen, but with the restrictions that you mentioned in place. This, to many, is not tightening up enough, or even it sounds like we are rather easing up. but the leadership of the country is of the opinion that people are COVID fatigue, and because of that, they will not bear any more tightening of the current regulations. What is happening, though, is all receptions or banquets that followed funerals or weddings have been completely cancelled, and a duration have been issued in place. Now, beyond that, there's a directive for government offices to run shifts. So automatically, people will no longer be crowding in the offices again, and they've been asked to go back to just around last year when we had the lockdown period where people were working from home, and offices, even in private sector, have been asked to do a lot of that to make sure that they ease up. There is also the re-engineering of what used to be the crackdown on those who are not wearing the mask. This time around, the police will not be deployed to various places to check it, but in their visibility programs, if you are found or if you are seen elsewhere, being without the mask, you will immediately be prosecuted. So this is what is being carried out currently. It's not really tightening. It's basically going back to what used to be the case, which seemed to have been relaxed over the period. There's a lot also about integrity from leadership on this matter, where people believe that all of these started when the executive president of the republic himself attended one of his official funerals unaided in a massive way that many felt was the beginning of the third wave. Not in preparation of, in fact, the president admits that we are actually in the third wave.
Yeah, it's interesting that you say that it's kind of going back to normal when there's this fear, around the rest of the world of the Delta variant. Aren't there, fears in Ghana that, they could see a spike in cases, especially with the Delta variant?
In fact, the belief is that since we are currently experiencing an elevated number of cases, so for example, barely 2 weeks ago, we had less than 1,314 active cases. Now we are zooming into almost 4,000 active cases, which is what's given us the indication that we are already in the third wave. The only difficulty here is that government is afraid of very strong restrictions compared to what happened previously during the lockdown. The fear is that it may cripple the economy. 2, it may also have unintended effects on the extreme poor. And 3, government may have to cough out a lot more money to support those that it supported previously, which was billions of cedis, which we are still debating, which people have difficulty with the accountability measures in place. So it is a fine line they are seeking to drive. On one hand, get people to do what is right, go by the protocols, and they believe that by going by the protocols, everything could be right. On the other hand, strengthen where you can strengthen. In fact, as we speak, we still have cinemas open, which barely happened a month ago, which was not changed in any way. We still have other gatherings, and we have nightclubs which are supposed to be completely shut in some parts of the country, still open and operating like normal. So I mean, it's confusing to the ordinary person hearing what the executive president is saying and what happens on the ground. Of course, if he had stated categorically that we are going to deploy security to check this and make sure we prosecute people, people might have been afraid, but the expression was that the police will do the normal things, their usual routine checkups. If they happen to find that you are abusing or not following the protocols, they may have to haul you in and deal with you. That, to many, is not strong enough. And the scientific community is very worried about the direction the executive president and the leaders for the country is taking it.
All right, Raymond, we hope, what needs to be put in place gets put in place so people can stay safe. Thank you so much for bringing us up to speed, and do stay safe.
Many thanks to you too.
And finally on the program, let's meet Jamila Bekor, an Algerian artist that creates jewelry using upcycled coffee capsules that she collects from cafes. She also distributes coffee grounds to farmers for compost, and an added bonus, the pieces of art she sells are good for environment protection. Take a look.
Algerian artist Jamila Bekor carefully picks necklaces and figurines she makes from recycled coffee capsules, laying them out on a table at a local flea market. The pieces of art she sells are a nod to environment protection, and which Bekur has been producing for the past 7 years. Working at her small workshop, Bekur, who does this alongside her day job, says it's become a secondary source of income for her, but also a way to send a message on the importance of environmental awareness.
It's a source of money for me, and at the same time, it's a gesture for the environment and the planet. Each time a client buys jewelry or a figurine, it's a gesture for the protection of the planet.
Bekur visits a specific coffee shop to collect coffee capsules once a week.
The manager really cares about environment protection. And as soon as I told him that I create figurines and jewelry out of aluminum coffee capsules, he didn't hesitate to save them for me. He calls me each time telling me that he has a bag for me, so I come and collect them.
Though it's an odd material, Bekur says the response to her jewelry so far is positive.
At first, I thought women will be reluctant and won't buy jewelry created out of capsules. But I was pleasantly surprised by the sense of environmental responsibility these women have who buy this recycled jewelry.
She mainly exhibits her work at flea markets, but with the coronavirus pandemic limiting the number of such events, she's turned to social media to promote her work.
And that's the program today. Thank you so much for watching. I'm Teniola Shibuale. Bye for now.